Hey everybody, welcome back to RotoCurve, and it's finally football season. I can't believe it's already here. It's going to be a heck of a season here in daily fantasy football, especially on FanDuel with the massive contests that they already have up for Week 1. Now, we're thinking about putting our lineups together. Of course, there's all the tools up on RotoCurve.com that you can use, but let's discuss some of the running backs we like for the first week of the season. Of course, on FanDuel, running back is a position you have to hit because chances are you're spending a big money for one of the guys, or if you're not, you're spending a little bit of a cheap guy at the running back position, which means that if he doesn't hit, you can't really afford to get a goose egg or a single-digit number from your running back. So if you're not going to be able to succeed there, chances are you're not going to be able to succeed and get into cash. So there are some running backs we're going to talk about for Week 1, and hopefully they can bring you closer to that cash line and get you some fantasy points right on FanDuel. Now, the tier 1 running backs on FanDuel are something that you want to look at for cash game, because I do think you need one guy that can really carry the load, maybe get 100 yards and a touchdown, catch a few passes out of the backfield, and really get over 15 FanDuel points, or even closer to 20 if you can score 2 touchdowns. Now, my top tier 1 guy for this week is Eddie Lacy, the Green Bay Packers. He faces the Chicago Bears. Now, of course, we all know about Jordy Nelson going down for the year for an ACL injury, and a lot of people think that means that Randall Cobb's value is going to go up, or if a guy like James Jones, if they sign him, his value is going to go up, or even Devontae Adams, second-year receiver out of Fresno State, maybe his value is going to go up. But for me, I think it's Eddie Lacy. We saw the Packers last year try to establish the run a lot more, and Lacy is very successful. He's the reason why he's one of the top fantasy running backs on FanDuel. He's priced very highly, and I think that price is worth it this week against the Bears. Now, the Bears had drafted a guy by the name of Eddie Goldman. He's a nose tackle from Florida State to try to shore up that defensive line. Now, defensive line is improved, but last year the Bears were not one of the better defenses in terms of stopping the run. And Eddie Lacy and the Packers really just kind of ran all over him. They passed all over him as well. So for a team like that really did struggle to stop the run last year, it looks like it's going to be a bit of the same this year, especially with Lacy getting one more year of experience, and he's really going to see most of the carries all the way down the field, with the exception of maybe a John Kuhn 4th and goal touchdown run on the 1. But you not really have to worry about that because Lacy's big. He has a chance to get into the end zone, and he's a top back for me in a good matchup against the Bears. There are some tier 2 running backs I want to discuss, and the first guy is Lamar Miller. Last year, quietly, Lamar Miller was a top-tier running back. He averaged 12.8 FanDuel points per game, which is the 11th most in the NFL. And that's huge for a guy that's priced not really so far in the top tier of running backs for Week 1. And he actually has a good matchup against the Redskins. Washington struggles through the air, are very well documented, but they also struggle to stop people on the ground. That defense has been rebuilt with run stoppers. We just talked about with the Bears draft and Eddie Goldman. But the one thing about the Redskins is they have a lot of big guys. They have Terrence Knighton. They have guys like, I believe they signed Randy Starks as well. So they really can stop the run up the middle. But way Lamar Miller and the Dolphins have been successful with those stretch runs, a little bit of a spread offense running towards the end of the hash marks or towards the sideline. And that's really how they've been successful, and that's one reason why Lamar Miller had over 1,000 yards last year. Now, he's the feature back in Miami. He's going to be playing a lot on passing downs. And rumors are he's actually going to see the goal line carries as well. So for a guy that's priced at just $7,300 as the feature back in a good matchup, I really like him Week 1 against the Redskins. Another guy has always had another guy behind him. That's Jonathan Stewart. For years, we've seen guys like D'Angelo Williams, Mike Tolbert. The Panthers have always seemed to have 2 running backs, and you really haven't gotten that feature guy that's been a really big fantasy star. But this year, Stewart's by himself. There is no D'Angelo Williams, so it really looks like he's the guy. I like him in Week 1 because he faces the Jaguars, who allowed the 6th most fantasy points to running backs last year, and they returned most of the same defense, so it's not much of a different defensive unit there, and the Carolina Panthers will definitely be looking to run the ball, especially an ACL injury himself. Now, the Panthers don't have many receivers. They have a good tight end in Greg Olsen, but they're going to look to establish the run and try to set up the passing game for Cam Newton. And the way that they're going to do that, run the ball with Jonathan Stewart. So I like him a lot Week 1 against the Jacksonville Jaguars, and basically for the rest of the season, if he can stay that number 1 guy. There's a third-tier guy I wanted to discuss, and he's probably one of the top value options. And I'm really glad he's going to see the chance to be a top running back this year, and that's Chris Ivory for the New York Jets. He's been a favorite of mine and a lot of people in the fantasy community because of his ability. He's fast, he's big, he can carry the ball well, he can run through a lot of tacklers on the defensive side of the ball. But he's never had that opportunity to be the number one guy. We've seen Rex Ryan kind of give him split carries with guys like Bilal Powell and even Sean Green and Chris Johnson in the past. But this year, Chan Gailey is the head coach of the Jets, and he really likes to focus on single back sets with the first number one back carrying most of the load. And that's what it looks like we're going to see with Chris Ivory. So it's going to be a lot of fun to watch that offense run. They have a lot of big, massive offensive linemen. So Chris Ivory's going to be a guy that his price will raise, but it's just $6,400 on FanDuel in week 1. He makes for a very good option against the Cleveland Browns. Now, the Browns last year allowed it for 100 yards rushing, 10 of 16 games, over 400 yards rushing in the last 3 weeks of the season. So they're actually a very good matchup. They have relatively the same defense coming back, with the exception of the first-round pick, Danny Shelton, who is a very good player. But that's just one player, and I'm not sure they can bring down Chris Ivory, who's really a burden to try to tackle, especially for 4 quarters. So I like him as a value option on FanDuel, and he's going to be a top running back pick for me for my lineups in week 1. Now, of course, you're thinking all these guys are a little bit expensive with the exception of Ivory, so you're going to need a cheap guy. That cheap guy, and I'm sure everyone's cheap guy, is going to be Alfred Blue. Now, of course, we know in daily fantasy sites when they set week 1 prices about a month or so back, of course, that doesn't take into account injuries, and that was before Arian Foster got hurt, before Alfred Blue was named starting running back. He is that starting back now with Foster out at least 3 or 4 weeks, so be sure to take into account the fact that the Texans and Alfred Blue will have a tough matchup against the Chiefs. But you have to remember, when you think about the Texans, it's all about that volume. Last year in a game where Arian Foster didn't play, Alfred Blue had 36 carries, which is an absurd amount. And that honestly makes him in play no matter what based on the matchup, because the fact is, if the running back's seeing 36 touches, he's got to have an opportunity to get some fantasy points. And that's just $5,800. That really makes the top tier play for him in terms of value. That wraps up my thoughts on running back for week 1. Be sure to take a look at some of those other top guys. I talked about my top guys will be Eddie Lacy, or like some middle guys like Lamar Miller or Jonathan Stewart. And my punt option is Alfred Blue to go along with maybe a Chris Ivory. So you have a bunch of different options to discuss. Be sure to take a look at all the other tools on RotoCurve. And let's make week 1 a profitable one in NFL. Good luck, everybody.